Vikings are one of the most romanticized groups of people in history. Their past has been imagined and reimagined, and what's probably the most strange to say, if you are not aware, is that there's a huge problem where white supremacists are obsessed with Vikings. Like, there's Norse symbols everywhere among the ultra-right, and hate groups are named stuff like the Wolves of Vinland, and white supremacists act violently in the name of Vikings. For example, the New Zealand mass shooter wrote, "See you in Valhalla." So the goal of my research project was to understand where this obsession came from and learn what people are doing in order to protect the Viking legacy. Hello. Okay, so my name is Valeria Corvo. This is Traveling Corvo, and I thought I would do a little bit of the reflections about what I learned in the research project. So, I interviewed a lot of professors, experts in their field, brilliant people. Thank you so much for giving me the time of day. And I learned a lot. Like, it's not a recent thing that white supremacists are obsessed with Vikings. It is a tale as old as time, apparently. We're talking 1800s in Europe. We're talking Nazi Germany. We're talking about this weird thing that happened in the US. Actually, if you go to Boston, which is the most mind-boggling thing, you will find monuments to a supposed Viking past, because they believe that the Vikings had arrived to Watertown, Boston. So you will find stuff like a Leif Erikson statue. You'll find stuff like plaques that point that Leif Erikson's house was here in the year 1000, blah, 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 blah. And all of this is part of the legacy of a movement that was trying to pinpoint that the Vikings had arrived to the US because in part they wanted to erase the Christopher Columbus narrative because Christopher Columbus wasn't white enough. It was a weird sort of white origin story, and I cannot explain it all right now because it is insane. Like, it's insane how history and fantasy were like literally getting reimagined. There's this entire book trying to pinpoint that Washington, the president of the United States, was somehow related to Thorskin, and therefore Harald Bluetooth, the king of Norway, who was a Viking, and also ultimately Odin. Like, it was a weird mythical origin story that white supremacists wanted to tie back to Vikings. Weird. And what is probably even weirder is that there was a lot of, like, fake evidence, like, in the 1800s that was unearthed. Like, people made these fake runestones and fake maps and fake towers, and they were all like, oh, the Vikings made these, that's why the Vikings were here. It was like supposed to be evidence for the Vikings arrived to the US. Fake. It has all been proven false. But people don't seem to know that. Like, I had a couple of people in my videos comment stuff like, oh, you should come to Minnesota, the land of the Vikings. We have a couple of runestones. They've been proven fake, but these people fully believe that they're real. Weird. But now I want to get into the real interesting stuff, because part of the research was looking at the past and seeing kind of why white supremacists became obsessed with Vikings, but the other part was trying to look at how people protect history, how people protect legacies, and in this case, the Vikings. And so for that, I traveled all the way to Scandinavia to attend some Viking festivals, to go to museums, to see kind of what and how the Viking legacy is being taught, and I learned a lot. The most peculiar is probably the term Viking and how it is changing throughout time. So Viking originally is a profession. Those were the people who would raid, who would trade. It was a specific profession, and it was a very small percent of the population during the Viking Age. But here's the thing, because the term Viking became so popular in pop culture, then museums are doing stuff like naming a Viking exhibit, and then you go into the exhibit and you realize that 90% of what they are showing deals with Scandinavian settler society. We're talking about farming, we're talking about clothes, we're talking about religious practices. It's not just the war and gore and the brutality that we would typically associate with Viking. So it's, one, broadening the term of the Viking, and it's also meant to portray a different side of the Viking Age. One that is much more realistic and that is often not portrayed in movies and TV shows. And what probably was the most exciting was going to a Viking festival. I kind of wanted to see how the Viking history and the heritage, I guess it's creating a sort of culture, exists today. And what I was so surprised about was that everybody was very, very adamant that they were like, this is an inclusive space. We do not allow for racism, we don't allow for bigotry. Kind of they make sure that if anyone has those types of tendencies, they know that they are not welcome. They can't outrightly just kick people out, but they make them like feel ostracized, because that is not what they want to be associated with Viking culture, which is brilliant. It's brilliant. So yeah, this was my research project. I don't actually know if there's going to be any next steps. I mean, I pretty did a extensive research project and mini documentary series that you are more than welcome to watch. And I wanted there to be information about this weird historical reimagination that is nobody talks about. Nobody talks about, and everybody should talk about because it is so peculiar and weird and interesting to dissect. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a brilliant day. Goodbye. I don't know why I did that.